Let's round things off today by taking a beautiful day in the neighbourhood.
Yes. There are many cultural differences between the UK and the USA, though in the interest of keeping politics out of everyone's ears for an hour, I will distill it thus. If you live in the UK, you are statistically unlikely to know who Mr. Rogers was. True, I knew who he was, and I suspect my cohorts here would say the same, but I couldn't have picked him out in a lineup, and I certainly never saw a frame of his beloved TV show, Mr. Rogers' Neighbourhood, which I understand is pretty much as hallowed a cultural institution as you can get in US TV. Anywho, A Beautiful Day in the Neighbourhood concerns itself with a well-documented friendship betwixt Rogers and Esquire magazine journalist Tom Junod, though I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that properly, though here Junod becomes Lloyd Vogel, Matthew Rhys, for reasons I can't be bothered researching. When Vogel is assigned Rogers as a subject for a collaborative piece around the theme of heroes, he initially takes it as an insult, butting heads with his editor and reluctantly flying out to meet Rogers on the set of his show. Initially, impressions seem suitably vague for a piece only required to fill 300 words, though something remarkable begins to happen when Rogers turns his insight upon Vogel and begins to help him process his relationship with absent Father Jerry, the ever-excellent Chris Cooper. Vogel is reluctant at first, but as the two become friends, he finds Rogers' unique observations on emotional development and often bizarre Zen-like asides to the importance of appreciating others, increasingly empowering in repairing his broken paternal relationship. Structured in a way that primarily focuses on Vogel, Neighbourhood somehow manages to capture a portrait of Rogers using only the periphery afforded his character, capturing him as somewhere between the mythical presence of a Dalai Lama and a kindly uncle who lives just down the street, which, to tens of millions of now adult Americans, is exactly what Fred Rogers was. It's a remarkable effort from director Mario Heller, who we last spoke about in the context of Can You Ever Forgive Me, another low-key film which I also liked a lot, and who I'm now committed to following with interest. Of course, Hanks is predictably excellent in his role, and were I to pick either of his two movies, which we have discussed here in this episode,
this one has a role, Craig.
Yes, I would certainly rather recommend this one as being the more valuable performance by a number of metrics. Matthew Rhys, who I don't recognise from anything else, is perfectly acceptable as Lloyd, though it must be frustrating to find yourself as a central character in a movie, gathering award chatter to be sidelined by pretty much everyone else involved. It is, however, Heller's show, and a very good show at that. Again, I do recommend.
I think the only thing I've seen Matthew Rhys in is trailers for that update of Perry Mason, which looks appalling because Perry Mason's an action hero, basically, it seems to be.
Oh, cool.
No, not cool, Craig. Why does everything have to be made gritty? I quite enjoyed this. What I feel like it is it's quite a good companion piece to the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbour, which I watched first, and I've seen it twice now. And what I'm aware of, both in that documentary and this, though, is that Mr. Rogers has no meaning for me at all. But the documentary in particular does a really good job of pointing out just like what he means to people. I think like the real Tom Junod, his article, and there have been other research articles and a couple I've read about Mr. Rogers, and the whole thing was basically everybody's assuming he was going to be the American Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
You know, nobody could have been that nice, but like every single thing I've read, every investigative journalist piece, every profile, is like, you know what? No, he was actually that nice.
The real deal. Yeah, which seems, it's almost sad that seems remarkable now.
Yeah, it's like that everybody's so cynical, including myself, you know, that you can't, especially this man who is so interested in children and stuff, and like, he's got to have like horrible skeletons in the closet or something. But it's like, no, he seemed like a nice guy who maybe had differences in politics or something, but I really appreciate how much he seemed to genuinely care. The documentary in particular, because it's showing the real Mr. Rogers, shows that this works as a nice companion piece. So it's weird that in A Beautiful Day in the Neighbourhood, Tom Hanks, and basically, had he been in the past, it would have been James Stewart. Now, there was nobody else that could play that role. It had to have been Tom Hanks.
Yep.
Right? And he's fantastic in it. But it's so strange that he's the star despite the fact that he's actually a peripheral character in it. Yeah, it's entertaining. He's a nice guy. I think it just doesn't do as much for me as it might do for an American because I didn't hear him till I was an adult, and only in the last few years really I wear the name for a few years, but so there's no nostalgia there. There's no connection at all. It's like just an interesting thing because he's a nice guy. I think if you're an American though who grew up watching him, then I think it'd be quite an affecting film.
I think so. I think, we as Europeans, we imbibe enough American culture to know by proxy. Like we've heard Americans referring to Mr. Rogers enough to sort of understand who he is. But I'd be very surprised if any number of us have actually watched the programme or fully understand until now, having watched this, actually what he represents to an entire generation, or possibly sort of two generations of American adults now. And there's a real... bizarrely enough, the most distilled experience of this film for me was, I don't know if it's just the mood I was in, but again, my wife and I were trying to decide what to watch, and we'd said, "Oh, right, okay, let's double down on Hanks and give him another swing." After being disappointed by Greyhound, and my wife had said to me, "Oh, right, show me the trailer for this then till I see what it is." And watching the trailer for it, I got weirdly emotional just even watching the trailer for this. And I thought, oh, great, here we go. I'm going to feel like I've been hit by a sledgehammer by the end of this film. And that's not the case. There are moments where it does manage to feel quite profound. There's one moment in particular which I think was a huge gamble on Heller's part, where Rogers and Vogel are in a restaurant, and Rogers asks him to take the opportunity to think about some of the people who are meaningful to him. And during that 60 seconds of silence, as the camera moves in, we suddenly realise that actually we're breaking the fourth wall, and Tom Hanks is staring into the camera at us. And in a lot of other circumstances, that could have gone down really badly. And actually, it managed to feel bizarrely profound in the middle of this film. And I think Hanks's performance is, in a sense, quite understated. Because I get the impression that Fred Rogers is quite an understated character himself, that there was an awful lot of depth to someone who appeared quite remarkably placid on the surface. And for that reason, I think this has immediately become one of my favourite Tom Hanks performances, because I think I get the impression, and again, we really don't know Fred Rogers the way that generation of Americans do, I get the sense that he's really fundamentally managed to capture something here that a lot of other actors might have struggled to do. And again, I'm not the biggest Tom Hanks fan in the world, but I really, really enjoyed this, and largely in part due to his performance. So it's like there are basically only two people I could ever imagine doing this. It's James Stewart or Tom Hanks. It's like, and James Stewart's probably closer physically to Fred Rogers, but for all that matters, which is not a great deal. But there's that. I mean, and Tom Hanks is regularly regarded as like the modern James Stewart, and you can see why. Even though they're in the real life, their politics are quite on the opposite side of each other, but he does seem to. I would actually, if you enjoyed this, Craig, I would recommend you check out "Won't You Be My Neighbour." I will do. I've already committed to that, actually, on the basis of some further reading.
Again, I mean, it's not going to have the same effect on you as it will on other people. For the same reason, it didn't have the same effect on me. It's like, he's nothing to me, so I don't have like the emotional attachment. But it's interesting because he's an interesting man, and the fact that he was absolutely genuine, as cynical as that seems, that's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. I think a lot of the emotional impact comes down to the fact that, given the times we're living in and all the reasons that we have to be cynical about stuff, Drew, the actual fact that this human being existed and was so transparently, apparently, just a fundamentally amazing guy goes off like an emotional hand grenade. It's more of a sad indictment of the times we live in that we have any cause to put that under the microscope whatsoever. It's so difficult just to accept that on face, but it seems to be the case.
Yeah, so if you watch "Won't You Be My Neighbour," you'll see that just how good Tom Hanks' performance is, there's always the danger that you're doing impersonation, which I suppose to the degree he is, because if you start seeing that, you see that the sort of very quiet and measured way that Fred Rogers always talked, it's very distinctive, and like his like calmness and his sort of slow movements and stuff that Tom Hanks is basically copied, but there's still. You still need to do a good performance to like breathe life into that and to not just be like robotically copying someone. So Hanks has done a really good job there. No, I don't have any further point. It's like, just like if you're like me, you're not familiar with art, I suggest you check out the documentary as well. Just then I think maybe have more appreciation for Hanksy's performance, because it just seems to really get the essence of the guy, at least as portrayed in that documentary. And that's all I've ever seen him in.
Yeah, and again, the film is ostensibly, not about Fred Rogers, so it's doubly remarkable.
He's effectively a supporting character, I guess, but it's just, you don't really, you're not aware of anybody else in the film for the most part.
Indeed.
You've not seen this, Scott, no?
I have not, no, despite the multiple recommendations to do either this or the documentary. But yes, I must get around to it. It does sound like it would be a worthwhile watch, and certainly Mr. Rogers seems to be what, to the generation of Americans, what Glenn Michaels would be to us.
Yeah. Not talking robot, though, or talking lamps.
I was going to say, who is Fred Rogers' paladin?
Yeah, I would start with the documentary, though, Scott.
Yes.
It's the way around I did it. I think that's probably because it gives you the important background.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.